You can't talk about what is proper human behavior unless you know what a human being is. And you can't talk about what a human being is unless you know what a being is in the first place. So we go back to some of the principles that we talked about in the beginning of the course, but from a slightly different perspective. Principles of logic. If you recall the principle of contradiction, for example, you probably should all know that is something cannot be and not be at the same time in the same way, or something cannot be truly false at the same time in the same way. So from that principle is derived another principle here at the bottom. It says the principle of sufficient reason, or the principle of intelligibility. For purposes of this class, we'll say they're the same. And they mean basically that there's an explanation for everything, or there's a reason for everything. Okay. Remember that cause is another word for reason. Okay. The Latin word actually means reason. Causa. So we go from the principle of contradiction then to the principle of sufficient reason or intelligibility. All right, and then we derive the principle of causality and the principle of finality, which is a particular kind of causality, from that. Now, what are the four kinds of causes that we talked about earlier in the course? I gave a desk as an example of how to explain the four causes which are listed up there.
Material, formal, efficient, and final.
Material, formal, efficient, and final. And what do those mean? A little bit of review of terminology here. So these are different ways of explaining what a thing is, or the reason for a thing, or the cause of a thing. Okay. Take the pass. All right, so we have this desk. How did it get here?
Someone brought me.
Or what is it? Why is it a desk?
Because we need it.
Okay. What is it made of?
Wood. And plastic and all these elements.
Okay. So it's made up of all these material things, right? So those material things are the material causes. Okay. But it's not just a heap of wood and plastic and metal. It's a particular arrangement in a particular order of those things, right? You gotta have the seat in a particular place. You gotta have the flat surface in a particular place, etc., etc. It's gotta be arranged and ordered in a particular manner to function as a desk, and it's gotta serve a purpose. It's gotta serve a purpose so that you can sit in it and write on it. That's what a desk is, right? So, final cause is the purpose for which it exists. That's one explanation of it. So the desk, what makes it a desk? Something you can sit in and write on. Okay, so that's the final cause. The material cause, again, is the matter, the material things out of which it's made. The formal cause is the arrangement of those material things, the shape, the order that makes it the desk. Okay, that makes it look like this.
What's that called?
Okay, the formal cause.
The arranged one?
Formal. Yeah. And then efficient cause is who put it together or what put it together. Okay? So whether a machine put it together or a person put it together or a combination thereof, most likely. A person used tools to put it together, or a person built a machine that put it together. Okay? And then if a machine put it together, then, somebody made that machine, right? Or if a machine made that machine, somebody made that machine that made the machine. Or if a machine made the machine that made the machine, somebody made that machine, right? Okay, so all those are those are efficient causes. That how did it come about? How did this thing get here? Okay? Yeah, those are efficient causes. And there are different order of efficient causes. Those are instrumental efficient causes. The principal or first efficient cause will be the first one in the order. Alright? So what started off the chain of causes? That brought about this death. Okay? So, the whole thing about evolution, a lot of people asked about evolution. The Catholic Church, for example, does not reject evolution. Evolution doesn't contradict creation at all. And here's why. Evolution has to do with material cause and instrumental efficient causes. God as creator has to do with final cause. Okay? And principal efficient cause. In other words, there's a difference between evolution and evolutionism, or the evolutionist who says evolution proves that there isn't a creator. The evolutionist who says that there's no such thing as a creator goes beyond science and makes an unscientific claim or an ascientific claim. Science, empirical science, which has to do with material efficient causes, instrumental efficient causes, cannot make any claims about formal and final causes. It goes beyond the scope of empirical science. The empirical scientific method is restricted to empirical material things. Okay? So it can't make any legitimate claims about whether or not there's a creator. So evolution has to do with the mechanisms of the development of species, right? So whether or not one species comes from another has nothing to do with whether or not there's a creator, a purpose towards which all these things go, and a creator that started it all off, if you will, right? A creator that's above all of it and sustains it all in existence, okay? And we'll talk about this a little bit later on. And there are also different kinds of evolution, obviously. I mean, the evolution, if you say in general, is a fact. Evolution just means adaptation to environment. So, or development, right? So there's microevolution and there's macroevolution. Even if we look around, human beings adapt to their environments, right? But and also, scientists have shown that there are certain species that have developed into other species. But there's never been any definitive evidence of the development of Homo sapiens from another species. You've ever heard of the missing link? Right? So whenever we hear evolution, we think man came from monkeys. That's not a fact. Okay. Whether it's true or not, you can believe in it. That has no bearing on whether there's a creator. It might be true. There's still a creator. It has nothing to do with it. Okay. So we'll see the arguments for God's existence a little bit later. But these are the foundational principles for understanding those arguments. All right? So, we have the different causes. Exemplary causality is kind of like a combination of formal and efficient. It's basically the idea that when I create this desk, I have the idea of the desk in my head, in my mind, and that idea itself is in a way an explanation for the desk. That's an exemplar of the desk, is the idea itself. That's exemplary causality, but it's not that important. So another example of the instrumental versus principal causality is the artist using the tools to create a work of art. And you could talk about this in terms of creation and evolution again, too. the Creator uses the mechanisms of cosmic evolution and biological evolution, whether it's natural selection or other mechanisms, to bring about the things that exist. Okay, those are instrumental causes. The principal cause is the Creator that sustains all things in existence. The principal cause, the principal efficient cause. Assuming there is such a being. We haven't shown that, but we'll talk about that later. Now, the principle of causality and the principle of finality, these two operate in the what we'll call the 5 arguments for God's existence later, next class. And basically the principle of causality says every cause is greater than its effect, or another way, in an ontological sense, another way of saying that is every effect pre-exists in its cause. An example of that is, if I'm the desk creator, I'm the one who comes up with the desk. The desk isn't greater than I am. I came up with the idea of the desk. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to create something that's, greater than I am. I'm not going to be able to create, create an angel or something. Create a machine that's more intelligent than I am. There's speculations of, one day we'll be able to create machines that will take over the world and are smarter than us. And this is one thing that we talked about last class is, there's the machines that have that can learn languages really quickly or whatever. But the difference is, the programmers, you put an input in, and there's a different output for every input. You're trying to figure out how to get different reactions out of it. The difference is, machines can never learn how to think abstractly or to love. There are no machines thinking about the existence of God or love, entering into loving relationships, okay, or justice. All right. And on an abstract level, philosophical, this is derived from the principle of contradiction, because from nothing, nothing comes. It's an ancient axiom. From nothing, nothing comes. And so, something can't come from nothing, ontologically. So if I have a certain level of perfection, in other words, something better can't come about from that unless there's a higher cause. So evolution, to give an example, says, yes, something better comes about from something lesser. But according to this philosophical principle, there's got to be a higher cause to bring that about. So without a higher cause, evolution is impossible. But that's a long topic to talk about. Now, principle of finality is a little more, maybe a little clearer, is that everything acts for a purpose or a goal. And when the word end is used, it doesn't mean a temporal end, like coming to an end, but just means a goal or a purpose. So in other words, everything, when a bug is moving around, it's moving towards food or whatever it is. Right? It's not just aimlessly, it's not looking for nothing. Now, so those are the rational principles we start out with from logic. And then we're faced with experience. The reality, the fundamental reality we're faced with in the world we live in is change. The world is constantly changing. All right. Phenomenon of change. So then what is change? How do we define change? And Aristotle comes up, this ancient philosopher who actually was a physician, started out as a biologist, who actually talked about evolution way before evolution theory came up. People think that Darwin came up with evolution. He didn't. But change, he defined as the actualization of potency insofar as it is in potency. What the heck does that mean? It's not that difficult. It's actually pretty simple. So I'm actually standing right here. I could be standing over there. In potency, I'm potentially over there. Now I'm actually over there. I just actualized my potency to move over here. Now I'm actualizing my potency to be over here. I changed. Okay. So that's a kind of change. Motion. All right. Remember the different categories. There are different kinds of being. So I could change the color of my shirt. If I got paint and painted my shirt, I would actualize the potency of my shirt to be another color. Right? Okay. So, in a nutshell, that's what change is. That's how change is defined. So if you notice, change is defined in terms of two concepts, act and potency. So the potential to be something and actually being something. Right? I know this is abstract, but here we'll apply it in various different ways. Form and matter is the most, should be familiar. Remember, formal and material causation. Right? So back to the desk. Desk, when it's just in potency, it's just a heap of materials. When it's actualized as a desk, when it actually becomes a desk, okay, then it's changed into a desk by an agent, an efficient cause, right? Actualizes its potency to become a desk, right? By imposing on it a form, the form of a desk. So then form, to use analogy, here's the SAT thing. You have analogies in SAT, right? So act is to form as potency is to matter. A substance is what exists in itself. And an accident is what exists in another.
What is this?
So, for example, I am not an accident. I'm a substance. This shirt is a substance. But they all have qualities to them. They all have characteristics to them that don't exist in themselves. They exist in those things.
Exist in something else?
Yeah. So the colors of these things. Okay, the color of my shirt is an accident. Okay, the texture of the shirt is an accident. The size of the shirt is an accident. It exists in the shirt. It doesn't exist all by itself. Anything that's an adjective, good. Anything that would be an adjective is accidental. Incidental, accidental. It's not substantial. Okay? Remember the different kinds of predication? Well, we had the 10 types of predicates and then the 5 kinds of predicating. Remember genus, species, and those things were kinds of predicating? So if I say, I am an animal, so an animal exists in itself. Human being exists in itself. So that's a substantial predication. But, I am hairy. That's accidental. That's an accident because it's a quality. It's something that doesn't exist in itself. So anything you describe about the thing would be accidental. But the thing itself is the substance that exists in itself. All right. So the accidents are to act as substances to potency. Okay. And then maybe a little clearer, existence and essence would be essence is just what a thing is. So in general. So the genus of the thing or the species of the thing. And existence is just the fact that the thing is. Okay, so I'm a human being, but I could not exist. I don't have to exist. Okay, there was a time when I didn't exist, and then my potency to exist was actualized.
What does that mean?
I didn't exist, and then I did exist. I changed. I didn't exist, so I didn't really change. But the fact that I didn't exist changed, and I started to exist. Right? So you might say, there was a potential essence in the mind of God, assuming there is such a thing, that was then actualized when my existence was created. So existence, or act is to existence as potency is to essence. So then there's a final principle that nothing can be an act and potency at the same time in the same manner. And what does that mean? If you watch the video of Bishop Barron when he says nothing moves itself, you might say, well, obviously things move themselves. What are you talking about? I move myself all the time. I'm walking around right now. Right? That's what I thought when I heard him say that. But I knew what he meant. It was saying this principle. So, when I move from one place to another, I'm in potency to be over there, but I'm actually not over there. And actually now I am over there. So the fact that I'm not over there is distinct from the fact that now I'm actually over there. So in other words, my potency is distinct from my act. So when I actualize my potency, my actualizing my potency, okay, it's actually my mind actualizing the potency of my legs to move my body, right? So then the question is, how does my mind actualize itself? And then there's, various theories about how my mind actualizes itself. Well, my mind is in potency, and my mind is also an act in a different way. So you have the agent intellect and the possible intellect. The agent intellect abstracts intelligible species and presses it on the possible intellect, blah, blah, blah. I won't bore you with all that. But the general principle is that act and potency here are distinct realities. We just talked about the fact that I'm possibly over there and that I'm actually over there are different things, right? So that's all that means. So anytime there's a change, there's an agent of that change. That's external to the change. The change doesn't bring about itself. Okay. So I bring about the change in my body. My mind brings about the change in my body. And something brings about the change in my mind. But what is that something that brings about the change in my mind? And that's where we get into then arguments of God's existence. For example, we have some principles here that I'm going to talk about as a kind of prolegomena or preface to the arguments for the existence of God, which we'll talk about later on this week, which are arguments from reason alone for the existence of a creator. These are principles of logic that one would need to understand in order for one to understand those arguments. So, for you to understand the videos that you're watching, that's what I'm trying to explain some of these principles. So we'll talk a little bit about evolution, how this figures in here. There were several comments on that. So, first of all, principle of contradiction. The principle of contradiction comes about from a judgment concerning concepts. Remember the three acts of the mind: conceptualization, judgment, and inference. So, we have a judgment called the principle of contradiction. It says what about contradictories? Contradictories, you said they're mutually exclusive, right? Or they're completely opposite. They cannot be true at the same time, and they cannot both be false at the same time. So, in other words, the principle of contradiction is that something cannot be true and false at the same time and in the same way. Or, another way of saying that is something cannot be and not be at the same time in the same way. That's the foundational principle upon which all rational discourse is built. Without that, there's no possibility for intelligent conversation. All right. So we're given that. Then we have from that derived a principle called the principle of sufficient reason, or the principle of intelligibility, which says there's an explanation for everything, or there's a reason for everything. Okay? There's a reason for everything. If there weren't a reason for everything, then absurdity would reign, unintelligibility would reign, in which case the principle of contradiction would not be guaranteed, and rational discourse would not be possible. From that principle is derived two other principles: principle of causality and the principle of finality. Before we talk about those, we'll talk about different kinds of causality, which we already talked about earlier in the course. It's made out of materials: wood, plastic, metal. Right? Those are material causes. The materials out of which something is made. Those are the material causes. Materials out of which something is made. But is it just a heap of wood, plastic, and metal? No. So what else is it? How else do you explain this desk? Is it just explainable in terms of material causes? Or is there another way of explaining it? A complementary, some other causation that needs to be added to explain the desk?
What makes it a desk? It's just the way it's shaped, what it's used for.
Bingo! There you go. Two things right there. Way it's shaped. The way the materials are shaped together, or you might say arranged in a particular order, right? That's the formal cause. This is terminology here for you. All right, that's the name of that cause. We're just giving names for explanations here. So it's not just a heap. So one way of explaining what this thing is, yeah, take the pass. Is that it's made up out of plastic and metal and wood. Another way of explaining that we also need is that it has a certain shape, a certain arrangement, a certain order of those materials. Another way of explaining what it is, why it is, how it is, it has a certain use. It's got to be able to serve a certain purpose. Right? It's got to be able to serve a certain purpose. Purposive cause or final cause. Final cause. Final does not mean the end as in like the end of its existence or something. It means purpose. The same for when we get down here and we talk about the end of something. Everything acts for an end. That means a goal or a purpose. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean temporally, like in time. The end of something in time. It doesn't mean that. All right. So, and finally, efficient. What does that mean? Doesn't mean that like the desk is really efficient at what it does. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there. It's efficient cause is who put that stuff together?
Company?
How did it get there?
Barco? Vehicle?
Factory.
Okay, factory. What was involved in that process that put it together?
Machines.
Machines. Maybe people, factory workers, maybe? Or machines, all by themselves, perhaps. Who made those machines? Maybe machines made the machines.
Mass production.
Mass production. Okay. Who made the machines that made those machines?
People that made the machines.
Who made the machines that made the machines that made the machines? Okay. So we have then efficient causes. How did that desk come about? How did the shape of the materials come about? Okay. So we have instrumental efficient and principal efficient. Principal, it means first. All right. So instrumental would be like the immediate, like the tools that were used to make this, or the machine that made this. Okay. The principal would be like going back in the series of causes. All right. What started off the process? Okay. Who made the machine that made the machine that made the machine that made the desk? Right? Or to give another example, the artist who makes a work of art, the tools that the artist uses are efficient causes. The work of art. This beautiful work of art right here on my board was put there by markers. Right? But was it markers just floating around making it by themselves? No. There was a person behind the marker moving them around. So the markers were instrumental efficient causes, and the people who were moving the markers around were the principal efficient causes. All right. Now, from those kinds of causes, we have two different principles of causality. And if you look here, material and formal are intrinsic to the thing. Intrinsic meaning within the thing, right? The shape of the thing and the materials out of which the thing is made. Efficient and final are extrinsic, meaning outside the thing. Okay? The person or the machine who made the thing is outside the thing, and the purpose for which the thing is made is outside the thing. Okay, yes, the purpose is to sit in it, and the shape of the thing is here, and that's part of the thing. So they're interrelated. The different causes are interrelated, yes. Now, we have, from these extrinsic causes, we have two principles. Principle of causality and principle of finality. Principle of causality, every cause is greater than its effects, or every effect pre-exists in its cause. Now, why is that? It's ontologically speaking, every cause is greater than its effects. This does not contradict the fact of evolution, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Every cause is greater than its effect. This comes about from reasoning from the ancient axiom of nothing comes from nothing. Okay. Nothing comes from nothing. Therefore, something can't come from nothing. All right. Therefore, something greater can't come from something lesser. All right. So if something, in other words, in time, if something greater, let's say human being, comes from a monkey, which has never been scientifically proven, by the way, but might be the case, doesn't contradict the creator, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The human being that came from the monkey was not caused by the monkey. Okay? The monkey didn't bring about the human being. Machines, right? Speculate about, one day maybe machines will take over the world. The thing with machines is, all they have is information. We program them with input, output. Input, output. Okay? And maybe they can learn languages faster than us. We can program them to learn languages. Languages, that's all it is. Language is information. Okay? But they can't speculate about God's existence. And they can't enter into loving relationships. And so on and so forth. So, that comes about from that speculation. Now, how does this not contradict evolution? Well, Evolution has to do with material causes and instrumental efficient causes. The Catholic Church does not exclude evolution. For example, some evangelicals do. They think it contradicts creation, but it doesn't. Why? Because creation has to do with principal efficient causation and final causation. Okay. So, in other words, there can be, cosmic evolution, for example, is a well-known scientific fact, unless you want to reject physics altogether. But, galaxies developing out of cosmic chaos, apparent chaos, does not exclude the existence of a supreme being sustaining that in existence and even guiding that and bringing order out of chaos. All right? Because it's a different level of causality. It's a different type of causality. Okay. So think of it like the artist and the tools. God the Creator could be using the mechanisms of evolution, whatever they may be, whether natural selection or something else, some other mechanisms, as the tools for his artwork that is the universe, and that is the human species, okay, through biological evolution. All right. Now, when we hear evolution, we think monkey into man. First of all, there's no definitive evidence that man developed from any other species. You ever heard of the missing link? Okay. I don't have any position on that, so it doesn't matter to me. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether human beings came from a previous species or not. That has no effect on the principal efficient cause or the final cause. Aristotle, people think that Darwin came up with evolution. Aristotle believes in evolution. Darwin came up with natural selection. That's a particular mechanism of evolution. Okay. Aristotle said, yes, greater things come about from lesser things. Okay, so in other words, greater species develop out of lesser species, but they're caused from other things. So there's a combination of causes that then bring about the other effects. So the effect isn't greater than the cause. Evolution in general is just adaptation to environment. That's all it means. Development and adaptation to environment. Okay? So there's different kinds of evolution. There's micro and macro, for example. Micro would be within a species. So like even as human beings, we adapt to our environments. Right? And then macro is the more controversial, where species develop into other species. Okay. The principle of finality is simply, maybe it's clear, it's just that everything acts for a goal or a purpose. So every action that something does is for some immediate or less immediate goal or purpose. So, a bug moving around is looking for food or whatever it might be. Okay. There's nothing that's just completely aimless. So, somebody gave an example of, what about people who are just kind for the sake of being kind? Well, there you go. For the sake of, that's the purpose. That's why they're being kind, to be kind. That's its own purpose. There's no purposeless act. All right, so those are the rational principles we start out with. And then we are faced with the reality, okay, that we experience, the world we experience. And we have the fundamental reality we experience in the world in which we live is change. Okay? The phenomenon of change. Things change into other things, adaptation, etc. All right. How do we understand change? And again, Aristotle came up with this definition. He was originally a biologist and a physician. And it sounds abstract at first, but it's actually pretty simple. The actualization of potency insofar as it is impotency. What does that mean? Well, to give an example of motion, like physical motion, is, I'm right here. I could be over there. So I have the potency to be over there. But actually now I'm over there. I actualized my potency to be over here. So actually I'm here. I no longer just have the potency to be here. Now I have the potency to pick up this cup. Now I'm actually picking it up. Okay. So those are changes. Okay, so remember the different categories of being? And all those categories of being, those are different ways in which reality can change. Okay? So most commonly there's accidental change. Things change color. Things change size. Things change shape, etc., etc. But substantial change is also possible. So, when somebody dies, the person's body is no longer a body, it becomes a corpse. It's a lifeless corpse. That's a substantial change. So, the principles of this explanation, if you notice, are act and potency. All right. So if then we take those and we apply them to these different ideas here, the principles we can apply to all different types of things. Form and matter you should recognize from those kinds of causality, formal and material causality. So, back to the desk. Without the form of the desk, it's just a desk in potency. If it's just a pile of wood, plastic, and metal, it's just a desk in potency. But when it acquires the shape of the desk, when it's arranged in that particular order, its potential to be a desk is actualized. Okay, so it's changed into a desk. And so you have analogies in the SAT, right? PSAT. So using that, you can set up an analogy here. Act is to form, as potency is to matter. Okay. You do the same thing with these other pairs. So, just a quick review. You should know these terms from the beginning of the course. Substance is what exists in itself. And you remember what accidents are. So substance is what exists in itself. So like I'm a substance. And there are substantial predication. Remember the 10 predicates we had? And then the 5 ways of predicating? Remember the 10 categories. There was one category that was substance. And the rest were accidents. And they were quality, quantity, action, passion, which is receiving. Forget drunk driving accidents or running into your friend in the hallway accident. Okay? It's not that. Accident is what exists in another. Okay? It's the opposite of substance. So what exists in itself versus what exists in another. So like the color of my shirt is an accident. It doesn't float around on its own. It exists in the shirt. But the shirt, does it exist in another or does it exist in itself? It's its own thing, right? It's a substance. Okay. So I'm a substance. So pretty much anything, to put it grammatically, if you're describing things, the descriptors or the adjectives are accidents. They exist in the thing. Substance is what exists in itself, the thing itself that you're describing. Okay? So the tree is brown, is leafy, is tall. The tree is a substance. The brownness, the leafiness, the tallness, those are accidents. Okay? So, again with the act and potency, then act is to accidents as potency is to substance. In other words, substance is pure potential in relation to accidents which actualize the substance. So the thing that exists in itself, the tree, it wouldn't be a tree if it weren't brown, leafy, and all the other stuff, right? Okay. So maybe a little less abstract, maybe not, I don't know. I think it's easier for me to explain. Existence and essence. Essence is just what a thing is, okay? Species, not in biological sense, but just in general. So a human being, for example, let's say a rational animal, all right? Or what I am, okay? And then existence, the fact that the thing exists, or that the thing is in the world. Okay. So I don't have to exist. I could not exist. There was a time in which I did not exist. So I was in potential to exist, and then I did exist. Now I actually exist. So my potential to exist was actualized. Now, I didn't have any potential to exist before I existed because, that's kind of weird. Unless you want to say that, if there's a mind of God, I was potentially existing in the mind of God, and then you get into weird speculations, etc. But you get the idea. So, act is to existence as potency is to essence. All right. So, all that to get to principle of change. The third and final principle, we did the principle of causality, principle of finality, now principle of change. Nothing can be an act and potency at the same time in the same manner. When you listen to Bishop Robert Barron's explanation of the first mover argument, he says nothing moves itself. Okay, when you hear that, obviously it's like, okay, well, I'm moving myself right now. What he means is this. Nothing can be an act and potency at the same time in the same manner. And what does that mean? Well, what I just explained, that there's a difference between my act and my potency. So I'm potentially right here. I'm actually right here. I'm potentially over there. Now I'm actually actualizing my potency to be over here. Okay. But what is actualizing my potency? What is actualizing my potency? An agent of change. Okay, so my mind is actualizing the potency of my legs to move my body. All right? So it's not as if I'm moving, it's not as if I'm in potency in the same way that I'm in act. You see what I mean? There's different parts to me. My mind is moving my body. Now the question is, what's moving my mind? Well, my mind is moving my mind. Well, then there's different theories of the mind. Okay, the potential intellect, agent intellect is moving the potential intellect, the possible intellect. The agent intellect is actualizing the possible intellect. Well, what moves the agent intellect? Okay, so is there a first mover? Is it the agent intellect? Or is there something else that moves the agent intellect? That's the first mover, the unmoved mover. Or is there an infinite regression of movers? Okay, that's what he's talking about there. Before we talk about the arguments for the existence of God, we will talk about some of the foundational principles that underlie those arguments. So, we'll talk about a little bit also about evolution as a question in regards to these principles. Ontological, anthropological. what does that mean? Ontos means being. Anthropological comes from anthropos, which means man. So we're studying ethics has to do with the right human behavior. So in order to study right human behavior, we have to talk about the human being. And so to talk about the human being, we have to talk about being in general. Ontology is the study of being, otherwise known as metaphysics. If you go to a college with a decent department of philosophy, they'll probably call the course metaphysics. You take several courses on it, probably. A more modern term for that is ontology. And anthropology sometimes, usually is empirical or scientific anthropology, but in philosophy it's philosophical anthropology is the study of man from a philosophical perspective. So that is what I mean by foundations, ontological, anthropological. So harkening back to the logical foundations, we have causality. Cause means, causa in Latin means reason. So anytime you ask why a thing, why, okay, or even what a thing is related to why, we have these four causes, different explanations for what or why a thing is. Okay. Anyone remember what I gave as an example? The form, you're right, the form, what makes a desk a desk?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the formal cause. Okay, what makes it a desk, the definition of a desk, all right, that's one way of explaining what the thing is. All right, but we start out with the material causes, the thing, the stuff that makes up the desk, the materials, the wood, the plastic, the metal, right? All right, so those are the material causes. So that's one way of explaining the desk. And then those things have to be organized in a certain arrangement, in a certain order, in a certain shape to make it a desk. To make it fit the definition of desk, which also has to have a certain what to be a desk?
Structure.
Well, I just mentioned that.
Form.
Structure or organization or form or shape. It also has to have serve a certain what?
Purpose.
Purpose. Yes. So it has to have that shape so that it can serve a certain purpose, which is the final cause. So this is terminology, all right, that we're reviewing. All right. So we have the material cause, formal cause is the arrangement of things, the materials, the shape, the order, okay, that by which the thing is what it is the technical definition. The final cause is the purpose, okay? So final doesn't mean like the end, like temporal end, okay? It doesn't mean final in that sense, okay? And also down here when we talk about the principle of finality, when we say end, we don't mean like the temporal end, like in duration, okay? We mean goal or purpose. Right? Efficient. Who can guess what kind of cause that is? What else has to happen for this desk to be a desk? Or to be here as a desk?
To be stable
To be what
and
it
sturdy.
is.
Form.
Stable, sturdy, yes, but that's part of its structure.
Has to be formed. It has to be created.
Created, yes, by something or someone. Right. So, someone or something has to put it together. So that's the efficient cause. That's what we call the efficient cause, just a terminology. All right, has nothing to do with how we usually use the term efficient. All right, so whether it was a machine that put the desk together or a person using tools, if it was a machine, somebody put that machine together. Or if it was a machine that put that machine together, somebody put the machine together that put the machine together that put the machine together. Okay, etc. So all those, if we can keep going back and back and say, so there was a machine that made the machine that made the machine that put this desk together. Did somebody make that machine, or did a machine make that machine? Okay, so all those are instrumental efficient causes. And the first one in the series is called the principle, or first efficient cause. Okay? This is another kind of cause, not so important. Exemplary cause is kind of like my idea of the thing. So when I am about to make the desk, I have an idea of the thing. That's the exemplar of the thing. My idea is kind of like the cause of the desk that I'm about to bring about. All right. Another example of instrumental and principle, the artist uses tools to bring about a work of art. The tools are instrumental, efficient causes. Okay, the tools are used. The tools bring about the thing. Okay, but so does the artist. The artist brings about the thing using the tools. All right. Good. So the principle of contradiction says something cannot be true and false at the same time in the same way. So in other words,
That's what relativism is.
well, relativism falls into the trap of contradicting itself. So yes, if a relativist is consistent with himself, which is very rare, he or she contradicts himself, violates the principle of contradiction. Very good. So the principle of contradiction also can be stated as something cannot be true and false at the same time in the same way. Okay, so derived from that principle, sufficient reason or intelligibility would say there's an explanation or a reason for everything. There's a reason for everything. Everything is intelligible. Otherwise, unintelligibility or absurdity would reign. Okay? The principle of contradiction would not be true always and everywhere. Sometimes things would be contradictory. In which case, we wouldn't be able to converse intelligently. Okay, the principle of contradiction is the foundation of all intelligent conversation. Okay, so everything has a reason. There's a reason for everything. There's a cause or explanation for everything. So then from that, we have these various kinds of explanation that we come up with, that we observe. The four causes, right? Now, if you notice, material and formal are intrinsic to the thing. Matter and form are a part of the thing, intrinsic to the thing. Okay? Material and formal causes are part of the thing. Efficient and final are extrinsic, meaning outside of the thing. Okay? Somebody put this desk together, and there's a purpose that was given to the desk, to this matter and form that was put together. Okay. Yes, there's connection to the thing. The shape serves a purpose, but the purpose was given to the matter by imposing the shape on the matter. Okay. So there are two principles that come forth from these extrinsic causes. They're known as efficient and final. One is called the principle of causality, and one is called the principle of finality. Principle of causality says every cause is greater than its effect, or every effect pre-exists in its cause. Now, to explain that is in an ontological sense. People think that this contradicts evolution. It doesn't. People also think that Darwin came up with evolution, and he didn't. He came up with natural selection. Evolution does not contradict this principle. Okay, one thing develops into another. Lesser things become greater things. Okay, that doesn't contradict this right here. Aristotle's the one who came up with this, and he's also the one who talked about evolution. All right, so real quick about evolution and creation. A lot of people made these comments in Shobi. There's no contradiction between evolution and creation. Why? It's real simple. Evolution has to do material and instrumental efficient causation. Creation has to do with final and principal efficient causation. Evolution in general just means development or adaptation to environment. Okay. When we hear evolution, we think the adaptation, we think monkey into man. That's not what evolution means. There's no definitive scientific evidence that Homo sapiens came from another species. Okay? That one species turned into Homo sapiens.
Yeah, but
You ever heard of the missing link before?
Yes.
Okay. So, whether it's true or not, I don't care, it doesn't matter. Science hasn't actually proven that, despite what some evolutionists want to claim. It doesn't matter because the final and principal efficient causes of all things is the Creator. Now, evolutionism is a philosophy. When the evolutionist claims that evolution disproves creation, he's going beyond empirical science to then make a philosophical claim, okay, that goes beyond the method of empirical science. He's going beyond his realm of expertise. Empirical science is limited to material and instrumental causation. That's all I want to say here. And the other thing is, the principle of causality is simply that the ancient axiom, nothing comes from nothing. Something can't come from nothing. And so when something greater comes about from something lesser, in other words, if a thinking being comes about, let's say in evolution, from a non-thinking or a lesser thinking being, there has to be a higher causation for that. Okay? A reason, an explanation for that. Okay. Now, the principle, real quickly, we don't have enough time to get into all this. We have a lot more classes we can get into this stuff more later. But principle of finality is everything acts for a purpose or a goal. So anything that just moves, whatever it's doing, is, whether it's a more immediate goal or a less immediate goal, is acting for some purpose. All right, whether it's a bug looking for food, whatever it is. Okay. So these are principles that underlie the arguments for God's existence that we'll talk about later. So before the end of class, I want to cover this slide as well, which is that we have those rational principles, and then we have the fact of change. The reality, the world in which we live is a world of change, okay? The phenomenon of change is something that we try to explain in different ways, and Aristotle also came up with these principles of act and potency. Well, what does that mean? It seems complicated, but it's not that complicated. He defines change as the actualization of potency insofar as it is in potency. What does that mean? Well, I'm actually standing right here. I'm potentially over there. Now I'm actually right here. I just actualized my potency to be standing right here. If you look at form and matter, we were just talking about this. The desk. The desk, when it's a heap of materials, of wood, plastic, and metal, it's potentially a desk, but it's not actually a desk. Once somebody organizes it into the shape that it's supposed to be in, it's actually a desk. So they change, the agent changes it into a desk by actualizing the potential the materials have for being a desk. Okay, so this is just terminology. It's just taking our common experience and explaining it in different terms so that we can then talk about God's existence in these terms. All right? So from that, there's a principle of change, third principle. So we have the principle of causality, principle of finality, and now principle of change. So nothing can be an act and potency at the same time in the same way. When you listen to Bishop Barron's video about motion, the argument for motion, it can be pretty complicated. And there's one part where he says nothing moves itself. Well, and obviously we move ourselves all the time, right? Well, what he means is this. Nothing can be an act and potency at the same time in the same manner. In other words, when I move myself, I'm not an act and potency in the same way. Okay? It's my mind that's actualizing the potency of my legs to move my body from one place to another. Right?
No.
Okay. So I'm actually right here, but I have the potential to be over there.
Get that mic.
Okay. So there's act and then there's potency. They're two different things, right? They're distinct realities. Okay. So when I actualize my potency to be in that place, my mind is actualizing the potency of my body to move itself over here. Okay. So then there's a question, well, how is my mind moving? How is my mind changing? Okay? And then there's the theory, okay, well, there's the agent intellect and there's the possible intellect, the potential intellect. The agent intellect actualizes the possible intellect. Okay, then there's the question, well, what moves the agent intellect? Okay, and that's where we get into, is there a first unmoved mover or unchanged changer, or is there an infinite regression of unmoved movers? And when you hear motion, that's just change. It's not just locomotive change. It's not local physical motion. It's change in general. Okay. So real quick, these different categories here are different ways. I skipped here just in case we didn't get there by the end of class. That's the most important part. But these different categories here are the different ways of applying the principles of act and potency to different realities that we experience. So to put it in terms of analogy, you took the PSAT, right? Sure. Did they have analogies in the verbal section? So you have act is to form as potency is to matter. Act is to accidents as potency is to substance. Act is to existence as potency is to essence. What are those things? Real quick review. You guys should remember all these terms from the first quiz, but I know you don't because none of the other classes did. Substance. Substance is what exists in itself. Accidents are everything else, what don't exist in themselves. So remember the 10 categories of things that we had? One of them was substance, and then there were quality, quantity, action, passion, which is not passion, like I feel really passionate, and all that other stuff, location and whatnot. All that stuff are considered accidents. Accident does not mean like running into something or hitting a car or whatever. Okay? It's totally different. It's just a term, a technical term. Alright, so substance. I exist in myself, or to give an example of a tree. The tree is brown, leafy, and tall. Any descriptor, those are called accidents. Leafy, tall, and brown, those are accidents. But the tree itself is a substance. Alright, so the accidents actualize the potency of the substance. Okay, existence, the fact that I am. I could not be, essence, what I am. I'm a human being. What I am, I'm a finite being, I'm a human being, I'm Dr. Joshua Brotherton. Okay. There was a time when I didn't exist, when I was purely in potency, in the mind of God, assuming there is a God. We haven't gotten there yet.
You had the potential to create a word.
Exactly.